Good day everyone, this is Unkind Roldan and today I will give and have a storytelling. So, are you all ready? If yes, lend your ears and open your eyes to this wonderful story. First, let me discuss regards the background of the entitled Bad Not Buddy. So, about this book, during the Great Depression, a 10-year-old homeless boy sets out in search of a man he believes to be his father. Bud Caldwell's mother died when he was 6 years old, leaving him with nothing but a cardboard suitcase filled with memories and a possible hint of who his father may be. Now, 10 years old and on the run, Bud lives among the homeless in Michigan, or in Flint, Michigan, until he decides to walk to Grand Rapids in search of his father, helped by a few kind people along the way. Bud eventually locates Herman E. Calloway, a famous musician who denies Bud's claim that he is his father. Finally, the contents of Bud's suitcase provide the clues necessary to prove that Calloway is indeed related to Bud, but not in the way that Bud expects. Next, let's identify who's the author behind this book. So the author behind this book is Christopher Paul Curtis. He is born in Flint, Michigan. Christopher Paul Curtis spent his first 13 years after high school on the assembly line of Flint's historic Fisher Body Plant No. 1. His job entailed hanging doors, and it left him with hatred for getting into and out of large automobiles, particularly big pigs. Curtis' writing and his dedication to it has been greatly influenced by his family members, with grandfathers like Earl or Lefty Lewis, a Negro baseball league pitcher, and 1930s band leader Herman E. Curtis, Sr. of Herman Curtis and the Dusky Devastators of the Depression. It is easy to see why Christopher Paul Curtis was destined to become an entertainer. That's the end of the whole summary of Bad Not Buddy. Now, let's tackle who are the characters in the story. Without further ado, let's go! So, the characters of the story. First is Bud Caldwell. He is Kristen's sleepy laboon towards the end of the story, and he is the protagonist of Bad Not Buddy. Bud Caldwell is a resourceful, intelligent, and optimistic African-American boy who has spent the last several years in an orphanage which he calls the home, and being shifted from foster family to foster home in Flint, Michigan. Despite losing his mother 4 years ago when he was just 6 years old, Bud remains optimistic that a new and better door is just around the corner for him to open. More than anything else, Bud wants a home and a family. So, let me give you a quote from Bud. This was the third foster home I was going to, and I'm used to packing up and leaving. But it still surprises me that there are always a few seconds right after they tell you you've got to go, when my nose gets all runny and my throat gets all choky and my eyes get all steamy. But the tears coming out doesn't happen to me anymore. I don't know when it first happened, but it seems like my eyes don't cry anymore. So for our next character of this story is Herman E. Calloway. He is the grandfather of Bud Calloway and the strange father of Bud's mother, Angela Janet Caldwell. Herman is the band leader of the Dusky Devastators of the Depression or Nubian Nights. Herman E. Calloway has a volatile relationship with most people in the story, especially his late daughter and long-lost grandson. Herman is often set his ways and does not want to entertain any opinions that go against him. Most notably, he takes Bud's insistence that he is Herman's son as a challenge and vows to find out the truth. So here is also a quote from Herman. I knew if I was a regular kid, I'd be crying buckets of tears now. I didn't want these men to think I was a baby. So I was real glad that my eyes don't cry no more. My nose plugged up and a little growl came out of my mouth, but I kept my finger pointed, cleared my throat, and said, I know, it's you. Now that we're done with Herman E. Calloway, let's now proceed to the next character, which is Angela Janet Caldwell, which is known Mama. Mama is Bud Caldwell's late mother and Herman E. Calloway's late daughter. Though Mama is dead at the outset of the novel, she died 4 years prior when Bud was only 6 years old. Bud's memories of her continue to bring him joy, comfort, and strength during his most trying times. Bud believes he carries her inside of him and inside of his suitcase, which is filled with objects that remind of him to her. Instead of a home and a family, Bud's suitcase and his memories of Mama are what give him the courage to find the man he believes to be his father, which is Herman, and find the strength to survive on the run from Flint's oppressive foster care system. So here is also the quote from Mama. She'd tell me, especially, don't you ever let everyone or anyone call you buddy. I may have some problems, but being stupid isn't one of them. I would add that the day onto the end of your name if I intended for it to be there. Your name is Bud. Period. So, now that we know the main characters, let me add some characters or other characters in this story. So first, Bugs, a friend of Bud's from the home. Next, Deza Malone, a girl Bud meets at Hoverville. And next is Miss Thomas, is the singer in Herman E. Calloway's band, though she prefers to be called a vocal stylist. She is kind, beautiful, and one of Bud's fiercest advocates. Bud adores her in return and thinks she has one of the most beautiful voices he has ever heard. Then lastly, Lefty Lewis is a funny, good-hearted, and kind man who appears to find genuine satisfaction in helping Bud to his destination. He has a penchant for lightheartedly poking fun at the people around him. He teases Bud during their car trips, as well as his daughter and his grandchildren, Kim and Scott Sleet. So, we're done to the characters of the stories. So, for the setting of the story, the setting is in Flint and Grand Rapids, Michigan, during the Great Depression 1936. So next, let's proceed to the point of view. The point of view of this story is the first person or central, because the only narrator that discusses the whole happenings in the story is the one and only, the main character, Bud. This is Bud's story, so he's the best one to tell it. We know that this book is in the first person because Bud says I a lot. And we don't get to know what anyone else is thinking or doing aside from what Bud tells us. Here's an example. Dangy, I'd never have any kind of repetition with the band now. The only thing I could do was hang on to the napkin and try to make it so folks wouldn't notice how wet my face was. See? So Bud tells us his own story. If this story were told in the third person instead, we might not care as much about Bud or understand his point of view quite as well. By reading Bud's story in the first-person narrative voice, we're able to understand what is his thinking or why he does things. Even when these things are confusing, like when Bud tries to drive away from Lefty Lewis in Lefty's own car. We trust Bud because get to know him as well as he tells us about his life in his own words. So, a quick overview of the plot. This story starts with Bud Caldwell living with a family named Amos. He has been replaced several times. However, he met Todd Amos, a young boy who sarcastically called him a buddy. They quarreled, which resulted in Bud sleeping in the family shed. Here he disturbed the trumpet's nest and sustained several wounds. She escapes the attack and retaliates against Todd by using lukewarm water to trigger Todd's urinating behavior. Bud was sleeping under the Christmas tree that night. A friend called Banks find him, and they ran away together. They tried to board a moving train, but Bud fails to get on it. He decides to walk to Michigan, and while heading there, he comes across Lefty Lewis, a family friend, and the man offers Bud a lift to take the kid to his father. Bud arrives to learn the Calloway is the name of his father. Lefty informs Bud of Calloway's career in music. They go to meet him, And on the way, Bud gets to know what Lefty was an activist. Lefty lives but at the place where his father was considered to perform. Bud is shocked to see that Calloway is old. He approaches Calloway to inform him that he was his father. Calloway does not buy it, and Bud begins feeling that his father doesn't want him. Calloway's band is whatever. Very curious about Bud and therefore lets him hang out and help them. Bud was starting to get comfortable with his receiving crew, but Calloway was still cold to him. Bud continued to help where they performed, and one day got the privilege of playing the saxophone. Later, Calloway threw accusations at Bud, saying he stole some precious stones. It comes to light that Calloway is not really Bud's father, but Bud's mother's father. Calloway remembered the loss of his daughter and comforted Bud. They bonded together, and Bud finally felt his grandfather. And that's the overview of the plot. Now, let's have the climax and outcome. So the climax occurs when Bud is forced to blurt out his mother's name, and the band members and Mr. Calloway now knows that she was Mr. Calloway's daughter and Bud is his grandson. Next, the outcome of this story is Bud is fully accepted in the Calloway family and even into his grandfather's band. Bud knows that he must be patient until his newfound grandfather can come to terms with all that has happened in his life. So, for the next discussion are the themes of the story. First theme is when God closes one door, He always opens another. The first and most important theme is when God closes one door, He always opens another. Bud learns this every time something eventful happens in his life and is followed by another path that leads him to what seems to be his destiny. The next theme is fate or destiny. Another theme involves the idea of fate or destiny. All the way through, the story events occur that keep Bud walking a continual path to Herman Calloway. For example, instead of being to ride the rails with bugs, he can't run fast enough to jump on a box car. This turns out to be good because Mr. Calloway is in Grand Rapids, not Chicago. Then the next theme is people helping people. A third theme involves the idea of people helping people. In spite of abusive people like the Amoses, there are many examples in the story of people banding together to help each other survive the depression. It leaves the reader with a sense of hope for what Bud called human beings. And for the last theme of the story is the impact of segregation. A final theme is more subtle, but nonetheless important. The impact of segregation. Blacks like Bud were treated like second-class citizens during this time period. They couldn't own land or enter into contracts, and the depression was even harder on them. However, out of this comes the sense that many African Americans became stronger for it. So now that we're done with the themes, let's now have the last two discussion regards this story. and that's are the mood and genre. The mood is at times troubling and even dark, but for the most part, is continually hopeful and uplifting. This is the outcome of a young boy like Bud who won't allow society, adults, or even kids his own age to hold him back from achieving his goal. Then the genre of this is young adult literature, quest, and historical fiction. Since Bud is 10 years old and the story only brings up a few weeks of Bud's life, we can imagine that this book is for young people. We can also tell that this is a book for young people because the language is relatively simple and geared toward younger readers. To sum it up, from my own understanding and perspective rather in this book or story as I had read also, is that Bud really inspire us, especially young readers, because this book taught me that no matter what happens, we need to accept what is or are the things happen and come up in our life, just like the foster family that comes into Bud's life. Since it's part of our life, in order to learn from it and embrace it, as I consider this is a part of blessings from our beloved God. So that's all the storytelling that I did. Thank you for watching and God bless. Bye!